Having now talked about, bit who you are and the way that you're working, I'd love to start diving into the project that you did with Heineken.
Oh yeah, that's a really cool project.
I think Heineken has a very big history of being the front runner on marketing, advertising, right? And I think that they are in the position to indeed make impact because they are one of these huge companies, right? I think in Canada, they've done a campaign to end the hustle culture. This is something that for a long time was very big, like hustle, work overtime, no balance. They did a very inspiring campaign in Canada. And I think they even have a target that is to have 100% of its barley and hops globally come from renewable, sustainable sources by 2030. So they're they're inspiring to do big things. And when we're talking about sustainability, we're also often talking about SDGs.
Yeah.
And even though individually they're very easy to understand, a lot of organizations feel a bit lost on how to materialize these goals.
Yeah, that's a big challenge.
And I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the challenge that Heineken had.
Yeah. So thanks for asking that, because it is a really interesting project, and also I think it relates quite directly to the challenge that many companies have when talking about the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. We can more or less understand that there's 17 and what they refer to, but they were obviously formulated at a global level by the United Nations, primarily for countries or for humans, not so much as a course of action for companies, right? So there is indeed a challenge like, yay, okay, so should we choose one? Do we have to choose all 17? What can we do? Okay, so Heineken, a company with a long tradition, family-owned company of breweries and beverage brands around the world. So imagine, visualize a family-owned brewery, right? So these people are thinking about good times, but they're also thinking in terms of generations and of longevity and of responsibility, right? So they have also got a long tradition of coming up with innovations and sustainability and responsibility. More recently, as you say, the local barley and regenerative barley, sustainable barley pillar and commitment stream. They've also got a great project called Drop the C, as in drop the carbon. So a carbon reduction program, every drop counts, a water saving program. So there was all these things already going on. But then the question was, okay, how does this relate to a strategy that we can use on the one hand to inform and inspire all of our colleagues, 70,000 Heineken colleagues around the world, into understanding how we as a team and company relate to the transitions.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, also obviously one dimension of the SDGs is also corporate and social responsibility reporting, because as a global alcohol company, they also have quite a lot of fierce dialogues with investor relations groups, advocacy groups, governments, etc. Right? So they want to position themselves and be on a pathway for doing good, so that everybody inside and outside the company knows how they can collaborate and move forward. Now, the SDGs are quite fun in the sense that they're snappy and colorful, and there's 17 of them. But they're not very helpful to make people understand in everyday life how their company relates to the transitions. And so what Heineken was looking for was a structure and a narrative to hold together all of these commitments on all these various topics relating to the 17 SDGs: barley, water, emissions, equality, diversity, inclusion, responsibility, all of those commitments. Now, in most companies, and the same was in Heineken, There was a department of people who were responsible for reporting on sustainability progress. So there was an annual sustainability report. But it was a report, really well designed, 30 pages of stats and words. I very much doubt if anyone in the company outside the CSR department would ever read any of it, to be totally honest. And I don't want to be rude, but I think this is true for many of these reporting initiatives. They're quite formal and they're quite functional, and very rarely does anyone think, I'm really, attracted to read more about it. So right at the beginning of the process, we identified that one of the dimensions of success would be that it would be something that people would easily, regularly, and proudly take and would be part of the everyday work life in some kind of way, right? So that it would relate to what they were doing on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And so the process we designed was a set of co-creation workshops. Mm-hmm. No surprise, obviously, in which we got a wide variety of perspectives. So that's one of the key dimensions to co-creation, is that you get a broad selection of perspectives beyond your own, right, to talk about the topic in a multi-stakeholder, multi-perspective kind of way. So what we had was sustainability experts, no surprise, reporting people, but also people from the brand teams. So Heineken has the Heineken brand, but also many other brands. Commercial people, people from production and value chain, supply chain. So all of these kinds of perspectives, all handpicked to be part of this project. And we went through a number of steps looking outward. So what inspires us? Who else are doing a really good job at this? How do we relate to those brands, such as, for example, famously, obviously, Patagonia is a very famous activist brand, Ben and Jerry's, very famous activist brand, very, strong on connecting social and societal and environmental topics to ice cream. So how could we take inspiration from those? And how can we then transform that into something which was a clear story with a clear structure in it, a structure of complexity, and then a narrative which could mean something to people, which then linked a sort of emotional or intuitive, attitudinal part to a quite more formal part, which had explicit commitments in it. Because obviously when you talk about sustainability, the word greenwashing also pops up.
Oh, yeah.
And people are afraid of, rightly or unjustly so, of being blamed for greenwashing. And so any company that has a good sustainable development strategy needs to have in that structure explicit commitments, right? So that's how the Heineken strategy is built up eventually. At the highest level, it's a beer mat, right? A bierveeltje, as we say in Dutch. A beer mat, a coaster, the things that sit under glasses or bottles when you put them on the bar.
Yeah.
So that's the instrument that we use to bring it right into Heineken world. The heart of the Heineken world is obviously people getting together, sharing a beer, having fun, or talking about meaningful stuff, but connections, right? Connections at the bar with 2 drinks at least or more, right? 2 people with a drink each. So the beer mat is the prop of that moment. So the beer mat has at the top level, it says, "Brew a better world." That's sort of the big name of the program. And then it has the slogan, "Raise the bar for 2030." So there's a call to action in it. And we're saying, this is our strategy until 2030, because that's obviously the timeline that's been set by the United Nations and the SDGs, etc., on the 2-degree pathway or on all the other projects. And then it says, okay, we've got 3 pillars, which is people, which is planet, and its responsibility. Because as a brewery, you need to take responsibility for alcohol usage, and the effect of alcohol, etc., and they do. So those are the 3 key pillars. And then each of those 3 pillars has 3 topics. Fair enough. And then below that, or on the flip side, you have 21 explicit commitments such as 100% of all our barley locally sourced, a social impact program in every Heineken market, or interestingly, from a responsibility point of view, if we sell Heineken, there should always be a non-alcoholic option alongside it. So you always have the choice of drinking a beer with or without alcohol. So all kinds of specific commitments, but only 21 of them. So, you know, it's not huge, but it's interestingly, it has commitments relating to waste, water, emissions, which are the sort of the hardcore traditional domain of responsibility or sustainability departments, but also about diversity and inclusion, about gender balance, about freedoms, about fair pay, actually commitments relating to each of the SDGs. But interestingly, we didn't choose to put the SDGs at the top of the structure, but we chose to leave them at the bottom of the structure with the commitments. So when you dive into the specific commitments, you will see that they connect to a specific sustainable development goal. And interestingly, there's a construct that I'd never heard of called the UN Global Compact, which actually translates SDGs to specific commitments and specific wordings of commitments that you as a company can say, yeah, I'm going to connect to that one, and I'm not going to connect to that one yet, or I'm preparing for that one, but I'm full on to that one. So that's how we did it. But what I think is so beautiful about it is that because of the process, we managed to get everybody's input on board. And because of the boldness, it's and the sort of the simplicity and the fact that it's on such something as democratic as a beer mat, as a coaster, the CEO of the company loved it because he can, you know, whilst he's doing his speech anywhere, he can just pick up beer mat and say, and here's what we're doing on sustainability. Look, here's pillar number 3, responsibility. It's one of our 3 key themes, etc., etc., etc. So I know that head of corporate affairs has a big one made, which she takes off her desk and holds in front of her Zoom camera and says, look, here it is. It's this one. And so it's really usable. So I think that is something that many companies can take inspiration from, in the sense that if you want to talk about equal rights, or about, let's say we want to talk about gay marriage, right? So same-sex relationships, then what Ben and Jerry's does on doing 2 of the same flavor ice cream, right? That's so beautiful, because you're putting, basically you're saying we're equal rights flavored ice cream, right? And so that really brings what we discussed before, you know, humanness and corporateness and professionalism into the same space. But you do need creative license. You do need, as a professional, as designers or as change agents, you do need to be able to be allowed almost to make change.
Yeah, that's very inspiring.